I'm Rick Edwards. I'm the Chief of Police for the City of Richmond. We're going to be doing our quarterly crime briefing today for the first quarter of 2024. But we'll start with the hot button topic right now, which is this past month. So obviously since Easter, we've had 9 people shot and killed in our city. We do have some updates on these cases. So this week we've arrested Joseph Treacle, age 20, regarding the 14-year-old who was killed in the 1400 block of Front Street. He's charged with attempted robbery at this point, but we anticipate seeking indictments relating to that murder. We've already presented out on one of the other homicides on North 23rd Street. The victim was Kyron Hosky. We've arrested Jawan Lewis of Richmond regarding that murder, and he's been charged with murder actually at this point. And then another update on the DeForest, 2100 block of DeForest Street. We've made an arrest in that murder. Keemon Pryor, age 20, has been charged with robbery and use of a firearm during the commission of a felony. So if you see this, one of the things that I think gets lost when we talk about the first quarter and even year to date is where we are in homicides as compared to this time last year. So this time last year, we had 24 murders. As of today, including yesterday's murder, we have 18. So that's a 25% reduction. Nobody feels that right now because of the kind of 2 weeks we've had, but it's important to note. It's important for our community to be aware of that as well. That if you were to compare it to this time last year, like I said, 25% reduction. I'd also like to give an update on the critical incident briefing that we put out on Monday. So we released that regarding our officer-involved shooting. At this point, we're going to be naming the officer who shot that day. His name is Officer Todd Hall, and he has 13 years of experience with the Richmond Police Department. I released that on Monday as part of our core value of transparency, and this is just the final update on that status. What's happening with that case right now is once the Richmond Police Department completes a criminal review of that case, we will provide the entire file to the Richmond Commonwealth Attorney's Office. Richmond Commonwealth Attorney's Office will review that and determine the best course of action, whether or not to bring the evidence to a grand jury or whether to write a letter of declination to determine if no crime has been committed. So we await that, and when we present that to Ms. McEachin's office, we will wait that, and then after that result comes back one way or the other, we will start our internal review to determine if any policy violations occurred. So here's a snapshot of Operation Safe Summer last year. I already briefed out on it. These are some of our partners. We did it June 10th through September 8th. The story of that was when we combined gun-related homicides and non-fatal shootings. We had 90 in the year prior. We lowered that to 63 for a 30% reduction. So the goal with that was to start, since we felt really confident in our partnership last year, so we were going to start June 1st this year. Obviously, the last 2 weeks have changed that, so we rescheduled it for this Friday with these same partners. So I can tell you on Sunday I was on my way to the murder on Jenna Shear. I called Colonel Settle with the Virginia State Police, told him what we had, and said we needed to start earlier. And he informed me that they were going to start spinning up as soon as possible so they could assist us. And then our other partners came in later. So we've all agreed to start, and we will continue that through the summer in an effort to lower our gun violence. So now we'll get to the first quarter of crime. And as I said, until these past 2 weeks, we had a lot of good things to talk about. But this is just leading up to the 31st of March, so to the beginning of the year. So homicides down, we had 11 in 2024 this year. That same period, we had 18 for a 38% reduction. Rapes were down 58%. Robbery commercials were down 64%. Aggravated assaults down 17%. And overall violent crime. Overall violent crime for the first quarter of this year down 7%. Where we were struggling, and we're going to talk about some of the cases where we've made some headway, is robberies individual. So 61% up. So we had 36 this time last year, and 58 was in the first quarter of this year. So that's where we struggled. I'd like to show you where these robberies are occurring. So robbery individuals, robbery carjackings. You can see the blinking light is in South Richmond, and that's where we've made some headway with some of our key arrests recently. I've already presented out on at the beginning of the year, we talked about the triple robbery of commercial that ended in a homicide. We made 2 arrests in that case of Jonathan Beltran and Rinaldi Monteroso. Both were charged with 3 robberies and the murder at that point. We've also made a significant individual robbery on March 31st of this year. Fayez Black, age 20, of Richmond, was charged with robbery, use of a firearm during the commission of a felony, and possession of a firearm by a previously convicted felon. We have only charged him with 1 case at this point. We're looking into other cases to see if they are linked to other similar cases that we're investigating. And finally, just recently, we made an arrest in 2nd Precinct on April 7th in the 3100 block of Broad Rock, where these 2 individuals did a commercial robbery. They were seized several guns and some of the property gained in those robberies. So Andreas Martin Chavez and Lionel Reyes Fuentes have both been charged with robbery, use of a firearm during the commission of a felony for those. Really good work by our 2nd Precinct officers and detectives trying to stem this tide of robberies. So when we talk about violent crime, one of the things I always want to share with you is the threshold report, and that's what's up next. So this shows the first quarter going through a period of time. That's how you get the best judge of where we're at with crime. So you see the pattern, and it's the lowest rate for the first quarter in over 7 years. So looking at 270, 271, all the way down to 200 this year, total violent crime. So again, that's the lowest in 7 years. We're very proud of that stat. Very similar to the murder threshold, so for 7 years. Last year we were at 18, as I mentioned, we're at 11. So really good rate there. Finally, for our non-fatal shootings. So we had 40 versus 38, so that's a bit of an uptick over last year, but still well below the average of 43. So we're pleased with that, although we still have some more work to do. And here are those non-fatal shootings that we talk about so often. So last year at this time, 38. We're up 2 in that first quarter, and that's for a total of 5%. Another thing I like to talk about is the accidental shootings, and that's an important piece of gun safety in general. So we're up this year. We had 5 this time last year, 7 today. One of those I presented out on last quarter. It was just after we were getting ready to present, where a 4-year-old boy found his father's gun and accidentally shot himself, and we made an arrest in that case. But these accidental shootings show a pattern of easy access to firearms by people who shouldn't have them, like children, very young children. And to that end, we'd like to just continue to get the word out about our free gun safes. So Dr. Gwen Andrews, that's her cell phone number. Anyone in Richmond can call her if they have a gun that they're unable to secure. We're doing that consistently. We've given out 195 so far. We have more, and we know that that's a good strategy to try to keep guns out of our kids' hands. Here's a couple good cases. We've talked a lot about Glock switches in the past. Here's a couple good cases where the federal government have adopted some of those cases. Sterling Davis pled guilty to possession of a machine gun. The arrest of Brandon Brown was sentenced to 4 years and 9 months for being in possession of a firearm and ammunition while in possession of a Glock switch. So these are good cases where the U.S. Attorney adopted some of our cases that we're very pleased with. And we talk a lot about violent crime, but number 2 question I always get at community meetings are traffic related. So that is something that is a hot topic for us that we want to address, and we want to give the community an update on where we stand with that. So our traffic fatalities are always a hot button issue for us. In 2024, in the first quarter, we've had 2. That number is still at 2, thankfully, where we were at 4 this time last year and 5 the year before. So 50% reduction on last year and 60% reduction on the year previously. So we get a lot of questions about our safety camera program. A lot of you are interested in that. So here are the locations. It's on our social media where those locations are. Right now, we only have 2. I'd like to give you an update on the first quarter of how many citations we've issued. So this is interesting. We have 2 locations, 4 cameras total, both east and westbound. So Patrick Henry and Linwood Holton. Obviously, the folks around Linwood Holton are doing a little more speeding. But the first trial period from February 5th through March 17th, you can see the numbers of those non-penalty citations issued. So those were the warnings that we sent to folks. And then on March 18th, we started sending real citations to people. And we're averaging, now the average per day for all those cameras for the 4 at the 2 locations went from, during the first part, 187 per day to 176. Now you can just do the math on that. As we add more, there's going to be more. The goal that I've talked about before is not more tickets, it's not more revenue. The goal is to slow folks down, particularly around our schools where our kids are. And the crazy thing about this is it's only 5 days a week the cameras are on, and it's only 4 hours a day. So 7:15 a.m. to 9:15 a.m., and then 2:15 a.m. to 2:15 p.m. to 4:15 p.m. So only 4 hours per day, 5 days a week, and they're not on holidays either. So very few days, and we're seeing a lot of speeding. And this is, as I've mentioned before, you only get this ticket if you're 11 miles over the speed limit. So now to property crime for the first quarter. A lot of success. We're continuing to see the downward trend in theft of motor vehicle parts and accessories. For the first time, we are seeing more license plates stolen than catalytic converters. That number is 31% down. Burglary overall, 10% down. Where we continue to struggle is our theft from motor vehicles, up 25%. And the big topic for us and for municipalities around the country are motor vehicle thefts. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But that's driven by those 2 crimes is an overall 12% increase in property crime. Let's talk about motor vehicle theft. This is another heat map where they're occurring. So that's the west end of Richmond, little bit parts of South Side, as well as the Shockoe Bottom. And to really break it down further, let's talk about what kind of cars are being stolen. So out of the total 412 stolen during the first quarter, 90 of those were attempted. So these are people that went into these cars, broke the steering column, were unable to steal it because either an upgrade or it wasn't the type of model that can be stolen. But it still has our citizens affected by that. They have to get the car fixed, and we still count it as a stat. So 28% of those are attempted, which I think in a way is a good sign, because they're not going to, the less times they're successful, hopefully the less times they're going to try to continue these thefts. So again, in the first quarter, 54%, 2 car manufacturers make up 54% of all of our stolen cars compared to all the others, and that's Kia and Hyundai. Another thing, it is a significant increase, but it's down from last quarter, and it's even down from the third quarter of 2023. So we wanted to show it didn't hit us. It took a while for the thieves to realize that this was a flaw in the system. So the first quarter is more normal. It was second quarter and followed by the third quarter where we really started getting hit with these thefts. So, when you compare it, it's down. It's still something we are obsessed about. We're trying to find ways to stop people from stealing these cars, and here's what we're doing about it. I've talked about it a lot. We continue to give away the wheel locks. We had 2 events, and it was based upon where we're seeing these crimes. So we had an event at Bird Park in the West End where we're seeing the cars being stolen, where we gave away 68 wheel locks to people, Richmond residents who also have who have Kia and Hyundais, and then Richmond residents who have Kia and Hyundais in April at Richmond Highway at the Satellite parking lot. We had an event there where 62 wheel locks were given away. And we're looking to do more of that. One positive note that I usually talk about a lot is guns stolen from cars. Now, 140 down from 164 in the first quarter. While that sounds like a lot of guns, it's still a significant reduction of 15%. We're hoping we're continuing to get the message out that owning a gun, is a right, but it's also a responsibility. And for God's sake, don't leave your guns in the car. So hopefully that trend continues to lower to 0. They should never be stolen out of cars, particularly unlocked cars. Again, part of our strategy is community walks, community engagement. So this quarter, we were in Fairfield Court, Broad Rock, and Broad Street corridor. Yesterday, some of you attended our walk, and I'd like to apologize for the last-minute change. So we were scheduled to be in the Museum District yesterday. We had the 3rd Precinct had planned that for over a month. We had advertised for it, but because of the last 2 weeks in Richmond, we decided to move it to the east end, and we did a very productive community walk on DeForest Street and Wickham Court, talked to our community there, got to hear some of their concerns, got to hear some solutions to some of those concerns, and we had so many partners out there yesterday. And I appreciate the media for covering it, but the Richmond Sheriff's Office was there, RPS, RBHA, Richmond Fire, Richmond Ambulance, Department of Emergency Communications, our private sector partners, all there trying to show that community that we care and to listen to their concerns. The next one's going to be scheduled, next community walk scheduled in Sector 411 on May 15th. You all will be invited. Again, next week we're going to be doing our pop-ups. So the next pop-up event's going to be in Hillside Court. We are always looking for those ways to interact with our community when there's not crime scene tape up, and this is another good opportunity to do that. Hillside Court is in one of our areas where we've experienced gun violence, so that's a focus for us. And just an update on our rehire program. So this quarter we've hired part-time rehires have been 15, and full-time officers rehired are 6. So at this point, we've seen, for the first quarter, we've seen a 14% increase in applications, which is positive. But as of today, we're at 598 sworn officers. We're authorized for 755. So we're treading water, but we still need to find those officers who want to serve our city. Here's an update on our recruit classes. So the 127th basic recruit class graduated last month with 10 new officers. I'm sorry, the 127th. The 128th is currently in training right now with 16 potential officers looking to graduate in August. So we're looking forward to that as well. Some of our recruiting efforts, we've been going to job fairs for the first quarter, 8 different events, various locations, various cities. But what we're finding is we're competing with urban environments from around the country. But it's still good to get the word out there, to let them know what a great city we have in Richmond and what a great police department we have. So at this point, I'd like to thank you all for coming today, and that's the first quarter briefing, and I'm happy to answer some questions.
I'll start. So, obviously homicides are down, but we've seen this wave of violence. I mean, why do you think we saw as much as we did in such a short period of time?
It's difficult to determine. I can tell you that last year at this time, April was our worst month. We had 10 murders last year. And at this point, we have no information that any are related. I can tell you that some are robbery related, unrelated to each other, but some are robbery based. But the majority of our shootings and our homicides are interpersonal disputes that escalate to gun violence, including yesterday's. So yesterday's murder was completely preventable, and we are making progress on all of those cases. I'm extremely proud of the work of the Major Crimes Division and the entire Richmond Police Department, coming back day after day after day with no days off in these 2 weeks. Those detectives have been burning the midnight oil and making significant progress on all of these cases.
I know violent crime is overall down, like Elizabeth just said, you just said, but how do you guys fight the perception that the city is less safe right now? I know a lot of people are concerned right now. What would you want to tell them?
Well, I think that's why I like talking about the numbers, talking about it over time. This has been a terrible 2.5 weeks. There's no getting around that. And I understand when you look at the news, when you look at social media, and every day there's another location where you see me standing out there in front of crime scene tape, it's obvious why our community is concerned. And we heard that yesterday during the walk. But it's important to get the message out, to talk about the over time. That's how you really know what it looks like in our city. But there's no sugarcoating it. I'm upset about where we are. I'm upset about the last 2.5 weeks. I think we are redoubling our efforts. And one thing I like to talk about with our officers who feel dissuaded sometimes about going to another crime scene, particularly officers in First Precinct, and what I keep telling them is we can't control outcome. We can control our effort. We can control the process. So we're focusing on that process. And some of the things that we've talked about as far as our hotspot curves, as far as our deployment strategies, as far as moving up Operation Safe Summer. There's no way we could have intervened on yesterday's homicide by knowing that was going to happen. But what we can do is stick to the process, knowing that over time we will see lower crime.
Chief, is there a suspect at all for the Jenny Sher Road shooting from, I'm going to get the date wrong, but in that shooting?
It was on Sunday, so not yet, certainly not that we're ready to release, but like I said, all of these cases we're making progress on. And I can just tell you that, we've been very impressed with the cooperation we're getting from our community on these cases. So that's another positive thing that's been helpful to us.
These young people that are getting access to guns, where do you find that they are mainly coming from? Are they coming from cars? Are they coming from their homes? Maybe their parents legally own them? Are they buying them off the internet? What seems to be the trend there?
Well, some of them are unknown. We don't recover all the guns. But one thing I can tell you recently is we're finding people have lawfully bought guns. You have to be 18 to buy a rifle. You have to be 21 to buy a pistol in Virginia. But as we know, it only takes a friend of yours who's above age or even a parent to buy a gun. And then even though I'm pleased with the reduction, 140 guns hitting our streets that are stolen out of cars is completely unacceptable. It's completely preventable. We're going to do our part to try to help folks secure those weapons. But it's frustrating because I know that when we look at the data, when we take these reports, we're talking with folks about well, why would you leave your gun in your car unlocked? These are often first-time gun buyers who don't understand the responsibility that comes with purchasing a weapon and leaving it in their car.
Speaking of parents, Operation Safe Summer includes a lot of different initiatives. Can you say a few words to parents who might be wondering what they themselves can do to try to protect their kids this summer?
Well, we talked about the curfew, and there's been a little misunderstanding about that. The goal of the Richmond Police Department is not to ride around and throw kids in the back of a van and take them places. That's not the goal. What we want to highlight is that it is against the law. We want parents to keep their kids in at 11 o'clock. But the other ask that I would have for parents, if we were talking about this years ago, I would be saying things like search your kids' bedrooms for guns or for drugs or things like that. But now we have to add the social media piece. I've talked about it a lot, but it bears repeating. We see escalation of violence, physical violence, verbal comments on social media that end in real world gun violence, and it's just completely preventable. So they should be monitoring their children's social media, talking to them about this. Is another thing that I would beg people to do, whether you're an adult or a child. If you know you're going to get in an argument with someone, or you know you're going to be in a physical fight with a person, and you think going and getting your gun is going to make you safer, it likely won't. It's going to escalate it. And the first time someone pulls a trigger, more people will pull the trigger because there's so many guns out there. So don't bring your gun. The time to decide on that isn't when you're upset and angry. It's to mentally prepare yourself to say, if I'm getting in an argument with my neighbor, I'm not going to go get my gun. At the worst, let's have a fist fight. But what we see is when it gets escalated, the first instinct is to go get their gun. Maybe they don't intend to shoot a person, but once that cycle starts, it's very hard to stop it.
I know we've talked about the community mediators and their role so far, but I remember around this time last year, a gun violence coordinator was added to your all's kind of initiative. Is there any status on that role or what they've been doing throughout all of this in the past 2 weeks?
Well, if you've seen me at all the crime scenes last week, you've seen Richmond Community Mediators. I don't know if Dr. Gwen's here. Okay, Dr. Gwen has been to all of those meetings with us, and I think that not just Dr. Gwen's group, but the Richmond, our pastors, our partners in from the Public Safety Division, people that are showing up to the Trauma Healing and Response Network, people that are trying to help us de-escalate these incidents, because the concern we always have is not just what just happened, but stopping the next one, stopping the retaliation. So I think having those people where cooler heads can prevail to talk about ways to constructively allow the police to do their job so that we can stop the next one, that's always our goal.
We heard from someone yesterday, well, John Burkett did, out at Wickham Court. He interviewed a woman who lives there, and she said she wanted to see a return of Project Exile. Could it, or something similar to it, potentially come back?
Well, I think that's definitely an option. I think that we already have those laws in place. So possession of a firearm by a convicted felon is still in place. Federal adoption is still in place. I think the difference is the scale in which those cases are adopted and the mandatory minimums. But I hope it doesn't have to get to that point. I think that, we don't want to, the goal shouldn't be to lock up more and more people. There are people that need to be taken off of our streets. But the goal for us is to avoid that early on with early intervention strategies. And then if you go down that road, then we can take it there. But the goal is is not to go back to the 90s. I understand why that was put in place because, again, last year we finished with 64 murders, which is 64 too many. I don't want to discount it. But a smaller Richmond, a city with maybe 200,000 residents as opposed to 230, had 160 plus murders. We were the murder capital of the country, and people were screaming for us to do something. So that number has come down significantly. And it's hard to, it definitely doesn't feel like that these last 2 weeks. But what we experienced the last 2 weeks was the norm in the 90s. So every day, every other day going out to a murder. I remember I was at the University of Richmond in the mid-90s. I was on that campus that is safe. I'm not from Virginia, so when I was on that campus, I felt really safe there. It's beautiful, the Gothic architecture, it's bucolic. But I would watch the news every night, and there were blood on the streets every night in Richmond, and I was shocked, but it was never on my campus. And it seems like, we've worked so hard to get away from that side of it that I hope we never go back. And if we have anything to say about it in the Richmond Police Department, we won't.
Chief, with the safety cameras, you said that there are 2 right now. Can you outline the strategy over the next couple of years for how many you want of those cameras to exist at schools across the city? What's the target?
Well, right now, I think we're looking at 13 locations, 26 cameras in schools, but they don't come without a resource cost to me. So every one of those has to be reviewed by a sworn police officer. Now, right now, we have 4 higher back officers that are doing nothing but that. Sounds like a terrible job to me. I would hate doing that, but they're watching the video, ensuring that the tag is right, running the tag to ensure that we have the right car in question, and they have to be prepared to testify to it. So it's incredibly labor intensive and costly for the police department to manage that program. But I do think it is interesting. It is interesting, and we will see, and we'll have the really hard data after a year to know if it's affecting crime in the way, or traffic offenses as we want it to. So I think finishing with those 13, an evaluation will be done as to if we can add them. I know there's a lot of talk to adding schools to, such as universities or daycares, to those locations. So, like I said, it's the number one topic when I go to community meetings. It's not the violent crime, it's not property crime, it is speeding. And if that can help curb it, I'm in support of it.
What's the end date for having all those cameras installed? Is that this year?
No, I think we're doing 2 next. We can send it to you. It's gonna be slow rolling. I would say by the end of the year they're in place, but let me get back to you on that.
With Operation Safe Summer, what are some of those community events going to look like? I know last year there was like late night gym, basketball sort of things. What do you guys have planned?
Well, the city is organizing all kinds of events for youth that we're going to be participating in. Last year we had 2 open gyms at night. This year we're having 4 locations. Let me see if I have I'm sorry, I don't have it right here, but there's going to be 4 gyms that will be hosted by Parks and Rec. There's all kinds of camps available at Parks and Rec for kids. Virginia Rules. James put a post out yesterday about that, and I know the city's going to be responding to with more activities for our youth for the summer. So we're looking forward to that.
Say by Memorial Day they'll have a big release of all the details, so look for that.
Historically speaking, if you had to try to emphasize one of those mitigation efforts, whether that is the community engagement, pop-up events, gun safes, what stands out to you as something that's been very impactful in the past?
Well, I think it has to be an all of the above approach. So I don't know that there's any one. We look at these issues from community engagement. We look at it from a deterrent strategy that I've spoken about. And then we also have targeted enforcement of people that are out there in our streets committing gun violence. Arresting them quickly is an important part of that strategy. One thing I also know from my time as a homicide detective, when we would look at the 90s, we would see suspect's name would be on the ledger on Tuesday, and then he would be the victim by Friday. So it's really important for the velocity of our investigations, our homicide investigations, to continue to make those arrests so that our community can trust the Richmond Police Department to get justice for them as opposed to street justice.
You've mentioned looking at social media to kind of squash some beef before it becomes physical, right? I think about the Amari Pollard trial and how he said he bought a gun from someone on Instagram. Are you using social media to try to target illegal gun sales at all?
Well, certainly we don't troll the internet looking for that, but we get tips from people often, screenshots of of social media posts, and we really know that our detectives are really good at seeing what's spiking and trying to surge resources to that location. A good example of that was about a month and a half ago, we had a community member text us a video that they saw online of a person that was making threatening comments to someone, and they filmed the 13-year-old block of Coulter, and they said, "We're waiting," in the notes. So we got that tip from someone. We surged resources there for the entire weekend. We had a police car there with their blue lights on the entire weekend to ensure that that didn't happen. And there's examples like that often. Like I said, our detectives have really gotten really good at it, but we always ask our community, if you're seeing something like that, if you know that there's going to be gun violence, if you're hearing that, please let us know. And RPS has been a great partner in that too. Like they have a robust security program that we work very closely with on those types of threats.
Chief, this is going to feel like old news at this point, but I was wondering if you could share anything about Officer Leary Wright, who was arrested for impersonating a police officer. That's the first for me hearing about that. Can you share anything what happened in that case?
I think we'll since it's going in the courts right now, our comments are limited to what we've already said. So we conducted that investigation based upon a learning of it, and our investigators felt like we had enough evidence. We met with the Richmond Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, and we charged him. And I anticipate, I would ask you to just go to the courthouse and you'll hear all about it.
I have a question about noise complaints. So we learned that there were over 2,000 noise complaints, but 0 fines issued between November of 2022 and March of 2024. Can you kind of explain a little bit about why that happened and give us some context?
Well, I think we've been going back and forth as a city on making it criminal versus civil. We have landed on civil. Because of that, we had to redesign our summonses specifically for that. So we cannot even issue summonses. Then the issue was, because it's civil, who actually can collect the fines for the city? So it's much more complicated than we had originally thought. We think we're at a good place now, so as soon as we get those summonses, we think we've solved those two problems of how does the court collect it. It'd be very easy if it was a Class 3 or Class 4 misdemeanor. We would just write a ticket to the person and we'd be able to address it. But because of that desire to make it civil, it's complicated the collection of money and who actually would testify to it. But we should have some news within the next month or two.